Hi everyone, thank you for joining our first user clinic of 2023. I'm Maximus and I'll be your host for today's user clinic. Our main objective today is to share about measuring return of investment of training as well as ArcLab's learner analytics features. Let us begin with a short ArcLab product video. Alright, thank you for watching the video. This session is meant to be interactive, so we welcome your questions and participation. Please ask your questions in the Zoom chat at any time or during the live Q&A session at the end where we also address the questions asked in the chat. Also, do help us to mute your mic if you're not speaking. Lastly, this session will be recorded for internal review, just like our previous ArcLab user clinics, and we will work to post snippets or the entirety of this session online. Now, on to our agenda for today. First, I will introduce ArcLab and our speakers, after which we will do a short sharing on measuring ROI of training, followed by a deep dive into ArcLab's learner analytics, and we will end off with platform updates, Q&A, and a short survey. And yes, our special giveaway too. Now, a short intro about ArcLab. ArcLab is a mobile training platform where we empower organizations like yours to deliver onboarding, training, digital SOPs, assessment, and surveys to your workforce with a click of a button, saving you valuable time and costs. If anyone is new to ArcLab, sign up for ArcLab Basic for free via the link you just pasted in the Zoom chat. Introducing today's speakers. James Chia is our CEO, and I'll be handing over to him to welcome everyone and show the learner analytics in greater detail. Dr. Karin Avnit is our advisory board member. She's professor at Singapore Institute of Technology and Deputy Director of SIT Center for Learning Environment and Assessment Development. I'm Maximus, and I work on ArcLab's engineering. Now, let me hand over the time to James.
Thanks, Maximus, and a big thank you to everyone to take time to join us today. So we hold regular user clinics to share about what we've been working on in ArcLab, but even more importantly, we want to gather all of you together, our community of practitioners, and we want to learn from one another. So before I pass the time to Karin, I'd like to do the same as our last user clinic and take a group shot for our social channels. If I may ask everybody's indulgence, just turn on your videos for a minute. Then I'll ask Maximus to take a quick shot. Maximus, can you help us with a screenshot? Everybody say it. All right, cheese. All right, cool. All right, thank you. So Thank you, everyone. I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Karin Avnit from SIT. Karin sits on our advisory board. She's known us all the way from when ArcLab was just a proof of concept, and I've been very privileged to tap on her experience and knowledge these past few years as we build out ArcLab. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Karin Avnit. Karin, over to you.
Thanks, James. Really a pleasure to be here and an opportunity to meet some of the clients, see what people are using the tool for, and so on. I'll do a quick sharing, as was mentioned here, about return on investment, not exactly as a how-to guide, but more of things to consider in what to think about when we are evaluating our investment in workplace training. I'll quickly start sharing screen. Right, so as Maximus mentioned, I'm with SIT, Singapore Institute of Technology. I'm a faculty member with the Infocom, Information Communication Technologies cluster, but my bigger hat is actually in education enhanced or technology enhanced learning and tools for education. So if we're going to start talking about ROI or return on investment, first of all, have to start with a definition, right? So when we're talking about ROI, we're talking about looking at how much we invest and how much we get out of that. Looking at the ratio, obviously, we would want to get as much as possible and to invest as little as possible for the same gain. And for that, we need to consider what it is that we're investing and what it is that we want to get out of that. And it's not as straightforward as one would think, especially when it comes to workplace training. So I think we can start looking at the cost of investment, right? What are we investing when we're talking about workplace training? But the first things that come to mind could be the time that people invest into training. And that includes not just our trainees. We may have people in our organization that are dedicated to making sure that workplace training happens correctly. We may have trainers, we may have HR people involved in this, administrators. There's all sorts of overheads that go into the fact that we need to train our employees. I'm sure you are very well aware of that, even more than I do. And of course, there's the time that the trainees need to spend in their in the training. So are we sending them to a week of training where we both don't have their time in terms of their productivity during that time, but also we are paying them for that time. So that's yet another investment that we're making when we're sending people for training. So talking about fees, obviously, if we're paying for some platform, there may be fixed fees that we're paying for a platform. There may be subscriptions that we're pay per trainee. We may be paying for authoring services or for the time that our trainers spend in putting training into a system and so on. The less obvious perhaps is about facilities. Do we need to hold a room in our place specifically for the fact that that we need to run training? This is something that is a form of investment. Do we need to feed people every 2 hours because otherwise they stop listening to what we're talking about? There's all sorts of investment obviously it goes into that, and I'm kind of wondering, you might have other suggestions in your head as to what other investments you're putting into your training. If you have some interesting thoughts, it would be nice to see those in the chat, perhaps. But this is just in terms of investment, what we're putting into the training. And I guess that's almost the more straightforward side of things, because the other side is what do we get out of that? And there could be a lot of things that we're hoping to get out of that. The straightforward one is learning. Obviously, we're sending our employees to training because we need them to know something. That may mean that we need them to have specific knowledge, or we need them to have skills. These are two different things that may come out of a training. We're also, one thing that we're getting out of training is satisfaction with of our employees, right? They can feel that they are growing their opportunities in terms of what they know how to do. They may be able to take up a higher role because of a training. They may be able to feel better about what they're doing because they can do it better. So satisfaction is absolutely a part of training. And just feeling valued, that my company feels that I'm worth the investment, right? I get to have time to learn and to grow because I'm with this great employer that is investing in me. But obviously, we are hoping for the two things, both the learning and the satisfaction, to lead to improved performance in work. because obviously that's our ultimate goal. And that can mean, again, a lot of different things, but at the very least, either improving the productivity, allowing them to do their work and the same work that they were doing, but faster, or be able to do more of the same, or improve quality of what they're doing so that they make fewer mistakes. We have fewer rejections from our clients or anything of that sort. And I think the point about sort of listing all of these things is to say that when we're talking about return on investment, we really want to think, what is it that we're trying to gain, so that we know what to measure, so that we can have some sense of our return on investment. And there could be a lot of reasons why we may want to measure this. One of it is because we may want to consider alternatives. Is this really the better way to go, or can I improve on this somehow? So in terms of improving learning specifically, if we're talking about the ratio here, then improving the gain is obviously part of improving return on investment. If I can improve the learning, sorry, without increasing the cost, then that is one way to get a better ROI. And specifically, we know things about learning. We know what works and what doesn't. We know that bite size is better than a 2-3 days intensive workshop, or even 2-3 hours intensive workshop with our clients or with our learners. That it means they are learning more, they are able to retain it better, they are able to use it better than what we do in traditional methods. So just by switching from a 2-hour to split bite-size types of training, we're already improving learning, and therefore ideally improving our ROI. Interaction during training is another very important point for learning. It's critical for the learner to interact with the learning content, so that they retain it better and that they're able to act on it when it's needed. But it's also really important for us when we're trying to monitor learning, because if we never asked our learners to do anything, then we don't really know what it is that they're getting out of their training. Another important thing about ROI when we're talking about workplace training is the ability to use the information when I need that information, because often we provide our employees with information, for example, when we're onboarding them, but much of the information that we're providing them is something that they will need perhaps for the first time 2 months from now in a very specific situation, and they may or may not recall what the details were that we discussed 2 months ago. And so having the information on hand, on demand, when I need it, is critical for improved productivity when it comes to the outcomes of learning. So if I'm going to start measuring ROI, ideally because I'm trying to improve ROI, there are all sorts of questions that I could be asking in terms of why am I doing this and what am I trying to get out of this? So for example, are my employees finding the training that they are getting useful? And whether they find it useful, whether it is useful, are two very different things. But if we're talking about satisfaction, then how they perceive the training to be is important. Do the trainings motivate my employees to invest more in their work with me? Does it motivate them to stay with me and not move to a better place that provides better training, perhaps for their employees? When we're talking about performance and about learning, do the learners even understand what is going on in the training? If you think about a 2-3 hour workshop that we may send them to, we don't really know at the end of it, did they understand it, did they not? We may ask some questions that may be relevant for those 2-3 minutes of knowledge retention, but it may not be effective later on. So these are all things that we may ask ourselves when we're thinking about what am I getting when I'm sending my employees for a training. And very practically, can I get the same learning from for the same investment, or can I get more learning for the same investment, or can I invest less and get the same learning? And this is where looking for the most effective or efficient platforms for training would be helpful. So a bit about how do I measure, because I think so far we were talking about what I may want to measure and why I may want to measure it. And if we think about our employees here going into a training session and later on going to work, then it's very tempting to think that what I need to do is test them at the end of a training session to know, did they learn, right? Was this worth doing? Do they know what they need to know at the end of the training? And this is a great start, but it is certainly not enough, because by knowing what my employees know at this point, I know something about perhaps what they'll do in terms of performance. I actually know nothing about the extent to which this training contributed to this learning. It could be that many of my employees actually knew all of this when they walked in. And so my return on investment in this case is very low. I could have done without this training to begin with. And so the next natural thing to do is to actually have a test before they started the training, so that I know if there's a difference between what they knew when they started and what they know at the end. So this is what we would call pre-test and post-test with reference to the training. And it may be tempting to think that this is enough, but actually there are a lot of things that happen during the training that may affect the pre-test and the post-test. And part of it is perhaps my employees even just getting used to thinking about what I just asked in the pre-test, which would get them to perhaps perform better in the post-test, even though they didn't learn anything from the training. Or it could be that there's an element of randomness of this. If I'm using MCQs, for example, they might by chance get fewer things correct here than they do here, and I would think that the training was useful. And so while this helps me understand the learner's progression, it still doesn't help me much with knowing about the actual training. And so if I really want to measure correctly, I would say, the effects of a specific training, then the next thing I need to do, and perhaps before that, is look at performance, right? So I can tell that they knew something at the end of a training. Does that actually affect how they work? It could be that the training engaged their mind, but actually they don't know how to use it later on where it is needed. And in fact, this is where the real value for me as an employee really lies. But the point is, that to really understand the effectiveness of a training, I need to have an alternative to compare it with. And that is, it could be a different group of learners going through a different type of training. Although in many cases, we would not bother to really have two versions of training for the same content, but it could be historical data. So if I measured in the past how effective I thought a specific training was, I could compare it now that I've changed the way that I train to the new method. And so if I can compare what was going on before and after learning and performances in the workplace later on, and compare between two different trainings on two different sets of people, then I can really get a sense of the effectiveness of this training compared to the effectiveness of this training. Now, this is all very sort of theoretical. Practically, this could mean no training as well, right? I can have a training and compare how well do people perform after this training compared to a group of people that did not go through that training. That is also a way of comparing that I can do. If we think about what all these measuring can be, then obviously the pre and post test can be simple MCQs, or actually these days you can even have written assessments that can fairly effectively be evaluated by AI. So you don't need to actually read through this, but you can have some sense of where people stand without having to go through very elaborative marking, I would say. But when we talk about performance here, it doesn't have to be a really direct measure of how quickly are they working, what is the throughput, how many mistakes are they making. It could be an indirect way of talking to employers, talking to their reporting officers, for example, see if they notice changes before and after, or if there are specific behaviors that they are noticing with a group of employees that went through a training as compared to a group of employees that did not go through a training. So basically, just to say, this can be as scientific or as impression-based as you can afford for it to be. And I think with James, we did approach in some of the clients that we're working with to try and make those comparisons and see where the values is. And it's really interesting to see how many different measuring points we can find to be able to really compare and see what is effective and what is not effective about the specific training. So just to recap and say that if we're going to look into return on investment, there are a lot of different things to consider in terms of what is important for me. What is it that I'm trying to save on? What is it that I'm trying to gain? Am I really about the skills here? Is this where I want to have my measurements? Or is it really about the satisfaction of my employees? Is a survey at the end of the training sufficient in terms of knowing that I'm getting something out of this training? So hopefully that was some food for thought. And yeah, that's basically what I had for us for today, but really as a starting point for conversation, if people want to ask anything or add anything on that.
Thanks very much, Karin. I think it's very great sharing that you had, and I learned a lot. And I also saw that Adeline had a question, so I think we'll tackle that at the end. But before that, I think let me just paste in the chat. Right, there is an ebook that we did on productivity specifically. So give me a second. So this is the study that Karin had mentioned. Give me 1 second. Right. So this is, in fact, a study that we did with two companies. So Karin had advised us when we were doing the study. So in it, obviously, it talks about the things that were important to the companies in terms of what they wanted training to be able to address. So starting with the performance gap and then working backwards and then devising the training. But we'll come to that. I think we can discuss that in the Q&A in the end. But thank you, Adeline, for that question. What I will do now, I think, is to do a simple sharing of the analytics platform, which I won't do in super great detail, but please feel free to stop me at any time if you want me to go into further detail. Before that as well, Karin talked about pre and post testing. So this is something that we had come up with. So in the case of, let's say, a coffee shop that wanted to train a barista, so in the knowledge of all the different beans, etc., before going for the training, after and in course. So these are stuff that we can, in fact, do very simple tests, and obviously ArcLab can give you that analytics for that, which I'll come to in a short while. All this is available in ArcLab Discover. So if you find a template that you like, feel free to adapt it, and then you'll be able to go on to create your own. Ultimately, ArcLab is an authoring tool that allows you to create your version of training for your learners rather than something off the shelf. All right, so let me now go into our analytics dashboard, and then we can take any questions that we have. Karin will be with us for a while before she has to head off, but we're happy to take questions. So I'll take maybe 10-15 minutes or so and leave the rest of the time for questions. And one announcement that I'm sure all of you are waiting for. A lot of you have asked us for that, and I'm happy to make the announcement in a bit. But let's go through the analytics first. So the first one that I will go through is on folder analytics. So let me go to my Avengers training analytics. So as some of you may not know, we actually helped to train the Avengers, right? And as all Marvel fan knows, that's how they defeated Thanos with good training. So folders was something that we built to allow you to be able to group different modules together into different streams or courses that you can then deliver to your learners all in one location, so your learners do not have to go to multiple links in order to access different modules. So all the groups together, we can access the top level analytics by clicking this button at the top right, if you notice. So how I went there, I went to the folder itself and then opened up all the modules in this particular folder. And then I go to this blue button at the top right. And from there, it generates a high level overview of all the key metrics that you would like to see at a glance. So obviously the total number of learners, those who have completed more than one, all modules obviously, and importantly, those who have not started. So let me go through a few things that have possibly be of importance to you. Number one, how much time was spent by all the learners as well as the average training time. And the other thing, obviously, is that we talk about improvement. So average score, average improvement. So this then looks at learners who have done modules more than once, and then the second or the last most recent attempt is compared with their first one, and this measures how the learner has improved in the multiple times that they have conducted this training for themselves. So this is something that also proxies for effort, because you also see that this learner is motivated to keep going back and making sure that they get better at their scores. Now, for a lot of administrators and managers, the one on the right, learners lagging behind, is quite important because it gives an idea of who are the people that you need to chase, sorry, not chase, follow up. So we follow up with people who maybe have not come to that training yet. And this gives you a very clean, very important top view of who are the people that you want to follow up with. Now, importantly, I think I want to let all of you know that this is able to be filtered by different groups of learners. So the default view is everyone, but if you had previously categorized your group learners into different groups, for example, in a F&B restaurant, it could be front of house, back of house. For a different type of organization, there could be different locations. So this you can then filter, and then it regenerates it for that group. So this is a function that I hope that you can be able to figure out, to use a little bit more. Now, the second thing that I wanted to mention is that the metrics are generated each time that you have regenerated each time that you add new modules in or you add new learners in. So the information is always current and up to date each time that you refresh this folder. Okay, so this is at the bottom, there are obviously the individual modules that you can see, and then these are the different number of people who have completed, those who have not completed, and this is something that you can then visualize easily. So this is the highlights tab. The second tab on the right is your learners tab. So this down then goes to the individual learners. So you can see at a glance who are the people who have completed different modules. There are different scores for different modules over time. And again, you can filter them by different groups, etc. Over to the right is your modules tab. And the modules tab gives a high-level glance of then the number of completions, performance, and the pass rates, etc. Now, one other thing that I wanted to show is the date filter. So all your highlights, learners, and modules tabs allow you to be able to filter by date. So let's say that you are interested in a particular time period. You can obviously change the period and then you apply. Obviously, nobody completed it during this period, so I chose a not too good one. But anyway, you get the point. You are able to filter it, let's say for learners that join after a certain time. So let's say you have an onboarding program and your new joiners for this particular month, you just want to get the metrics for this particular month, you can filter it by date. Last but not least, on the top right, you have a export to Excel button. So if you click that, you are able to then again select whether you want it for everybody or just particular groups. And then you can then choose who to export it to. You will send it to yourself, definitely. But if you want to add somebody else, you can also do that. And what that happens is that Excel file will be generated and then it will be sent to your email. So this allows you to be able to get everything that you see in your ArcLab dashboard into an Excel folder that you can then manipulate in every way that you want. Now, we are working on this to be able to be done on an automated basis. So bear with us. This will come in a short while, but it is already available for individual modules, which I will come to right now. So this is folder analytics, gives you the top level analytics for a group of modules. So now what I will do is to go to the individual module analytics. Give me 1 second. So let me zero in on two sections. Give me one sec. I will now select the second one, or rather the first one, service excellence, effective communication. So there are a few ways to access module analytics. One is to just click this icon here. And then you can see already at a glance, you have all your different, at the highlights, the number of learners, the leaderboard, number of most attempts, etc. So these are then high-level overview that you can see. Now, one that is interesting, and you may not have, maybe some of you have not seen before, is the ability to be able to have a radar chart generated. And this is basically generated when you have your MCQs, you tag them to specific areas of quote unquote your syllabus or different areas of training. And then this will generate based on the performance in there by the learner. So let me show you what I mean. So if you go to edit project, you see that in the different multiple choice questions that I have done, I can, in fact, at the bottom right, I can add a question tag. So this question tag here allows me to be able to then group questions into different areas of training. And then after that, when the learners have answered the questions, they will then be scored on that particular metric. So let me go back to my module analytics. Again, this is a second way. Just by going into your editor, you can see that there's also the icon here. When you click it, let's see, but let's go back and you can see that all these different areas of the questions can now be displayed on the radar chart. So this only happens when you have tagged your questions beforehand. So something for you to consider if you have not done before. Now, if you go down to the bottom, you'll see that there are different, there's again a heat map of this particular learner who has done this question, and then the questions that they are got right and wrong. Let me move on to the next tab, which is the Learners tab. Again, at the Learners tab, you can see that there are all the different attempts by each learner. So you can either expand it to see everybody's details. You can hide it. But one thing that I wanted to show you is that you can, in fact, if you have not done this before, you can, in fact, delete away a particular learner's entry. Obviously, don't do that frivolously. It's once you delete it, it's gone. But the reason why we have this delete button is you may be testing this module on a group of pilot learners, and these are not actually the group of learners that you wanted to measure their learning. So after you have tested it with a pilot group, you may want to delete this before you then send it out to the main group of learners that you want to get that training sent out to. So this is just an option for you if you find that this is something useful for maybe pilot runs before the main training body. Third is the questions tab. So the questions tab, once again, you have each individual question, all the number of rights and wrongs, and MCQ, etc. And one thing that Karin talked about is about the learner's experience taking that particular training. This can be done with a simple Likert scale screen, and then the learners can answer. And one of the suggestions given by one of you is to have an average score here, which we are working to add, just like here. For each individual question, you have the average score by each learner. Once again, you can also export this to your Excel file. So if you click this green button on the top right, you are able to generate a simple Excel file, which you can then manipulate. Now, I talked about automating these reports to be sent to you. We are already live for module analytics. And the way that this is done is by going back to your editor dashboard. And at the editor dashboard, you can see this at the title, go down to manage emails. And when you do manage emails, you are able to then select, let's say that you want the learner to receive a report each time he or she completes the training. You can check this, and then an email will be sent. You can also send an email to yourself each time a learner completes a module. So if you have a lot of learners, I don't recommend that because you could be getting emails every minute. But one other important way is to send a consolidated report. And the frequency can be daily, which will send at 8 o'clock every morning, weekly, the first Monday, every Monday at 8 o'clock a.m. Singapore time, or monthly, which will be sent on the first of each month, and then you will get the report for the previous month. So again, this will by default be sent to your email address, but you can also type in who you want to receive this report. It could be a supervisor or even a management, etc. So this is all you need to do is save changes, and then you click publish, and then this email will be automatically generated for based on the frequencies that you have set beforehand. All right, so that is a high level, I guess, run through of the different types of analytics that we have in our platform at this point in time. Now, obviously, we're constantly working on a lot more, and I'll share a little bit more about this after this demonstration. Now, before I actually open the time for Q&A, one last, I guess, analytics that I wanted to share with you is the learner metrics, which, again, we built in response to a lot of your very great suggestions. So learner metrics, in fact, tells you how many people have accessed your training over this month or also for previous months. Now, notice that you can also group them, you filter them by, again, all learners or even individual groups of learners. And all this will then gives you a better sense of, in terms of even how the training take-up has been in your organization, how it's been rolled out, and also in terms of a more commercial basis, maybe in terms of managing your subscription, you find that, oh, you sign up for 150 learners per month, but constantly you are having a little bit more. Maybe it's useful to then think about adjusting your subscription accordingly. So this is again something that we have built in response to very great suggestions from all of you. So in a very high level nutshell, that's pretty much it. I would just summarize by saying that there are three main things that we've built. One is at the folder level, where we group different modules together. This folder analytics allows you to see at a glance for the entire series of training. You can drill down into individual modules. And then the last one is that the learner metrics that we have for that month. So I think we have some announcements on what are the things that we will be building later. But first, I wanted to leave this time for Q&A.